Missed an episode of your favorite podcast? Choose from over a decade of content in our archives, not just the latest episode. All free at GCNlive.com.
This is your call to action. Get prepared, America. Economy, survival, energy, disasters. This is USAPrepares.com. Informative radio, educational radio. Interact now by emailing instructor@USAPrepares.com or text at 434-390-7953. Class, please take your seats. Now, your instructor, Vincent Finelli.
Everyone all set? Cocked? Locked? Here we go. Your dial set correctly to USA Prepares. Thank you for being in class today. John is engineering the broadcast in Minnesota. I'm Vincent Finelli. Very serious topic today. You can probably tell by the tone of my voice. If you'd like to call us, 866-582-9933, 866-582-9933. Telephone listen line, 605-477-3249, 605-477-3249. David in Illinois is with us. Welcome, David.
How you doing?
Well, I'll tell you what. Well, I'm sure, but it's just you and me and sitting around the kitchen table, just grabbing a cup of coffee and chatting. Let's start with class. This broadcast may curl your spine. We're going to be talking about John Wayne Gacy. Let me tell you who he is. For those of you who haven't heard that name, John Wayne Gacy was born in 1942. He died in 1994. He was an American serial killer and rapist. He sexually assaulted, tortured, and murdered at least 33 teenage boys and young men between 1972 and 1978 in Cook County, Illinois, which is part of metropolitan Chicago. His murders were committed inside his Norwood Park ranch house. His victims were typically induced by force or deception, and all except one of his victims were murdered either by asphyxiation or strangulation with a makeshift tourniquet. And his first victim was stabbed to death. Gacy buried 26 of his victims in a crawl space of his home. 3 other victims were buried elsewhere on his property, while 3 bodies of his last 4 known victims were discarded in the Des Plaines River. He was convicted of 33 murders. He was sentenced to death in 1980, and he spent 14 years on death row before he was executed by lethal injection at the Stateville Correctional Center in 1994. David in Illinois, is that the John Wayne Gacy that you met?
Yes, that's the guy. That's the guy that, this was before he got caught, though. I had a friend that stayed with me and finished school, and we lived in the suburbs. Now, I was around a lot of police action, and moved around and hidden around a lot. So I seen a lot of things. And when the friend stayed with me, it was the summertime. Now, we had a different school system there. He did. I was pulled out of school again at that time. So they would go to school 45 days and off 15. So when the schools would switch, my dad would pull me different places and keep me there, so it wasn't so much notice that there's a stray kid moving around. So we would go over to the river and the lakes over there every day once the weather got nice, where we lived. And everywhere around us there was pretty much woods except for the subdivisions they were developing. And we would go there because that was my grocery store, okay? I didn't have food like your normal people did, so I had to go get my own food. So when my friend went there, stayed with me, we were there every day because my father kind of treated him the same way as he did me. So he was nutrition too. So we would go there every day fishing. We would do everything to try to find food. So one day we went and we took a pellet rifle because he had a bright idea to try to get a duck. So we went around through the woods and we came up through the woods and we walked up to a hill and we noticed somebody was there was a concrete, like somebody was building something up on top of the hill. And it was kind of strange when we seen it. At first, he thought maybe there was a fire. And I'm like, fire don't clean concrete off perfect. This isn't right. And plus, it was a very strange looking, it was not like a house. It was just put together like somebody was just putting anything together, filling in, and it wasn't all filled in. So we went up to the center part where it wasn't filled in at, and there was clothes in there. And there was not only clothes, there was a big ball of something in the pit at the corner. And we were getting ready to go down in there because my friend said, hey, maybe there's money, because there was a pair of blue jeans in there that we noticed right away, plus some shoes and a shirt. And he wanted to see if there was money in there because he was very hungry. And when I started to go down there and look, that's when I noticed all the blood all over the clothes. And I can describe it to this day. The shoes alone, there was big blotches of dark maroon red, and where the edges were, it was like off-white, where the edges of the spots were. And, and every once in a while you had the cloth from like the clothes sticking up through where you'd have a little bit of spot of off-white there. And that's when I first noticed that. And I started to go down there looking, and my friend jumped up right away, and he said, Dave, turn around. And I said, what? He said, this guy's running over here. Turn around, hurry. And I turned around just quick enough, and then he stopped right away, and he was dragging this kid with him. And the whole situation was you knew something wasn't right. My friend was nervous, and the first thing he did, he came up and he started joking with us. He said, so what kind of gun is that? And my friend didn't really want to tell him. And he said, is that a BB gun or a 22? And he just said, well, yeah, because you couldn't tell. He had a Crossman. So you couldn't really tell from, if it was that or a 22 or a pellet gun unless you looked at it. It wasn't like the Daisy pumps that had the extra pump on it. But so after he, got calmer, and I kept looking back, and I wanted to see what was in the big bundle down there, because there was a big ball of something in the corner. And every time I looked down there more at it, he got more nervous. I mean, this guy, he got really nervous. And then he tried, and he lied. He started lying right off the bat. He says, why don't you guys come over to my place? We can set up a range in the basement, and you can sit there and shoot all you want. And now, mind you, he said, we can set up a range in the basement and shoot. Well, that didn't go, so he had to turn it up even more. Then he sat there and he told us, now, well, I tell you what, I got a gun at home. I got a gun. We can go down there, and I shoot all the time, And I'm looking, I'm like, wait a minute. This guy is in the suburbs. He's shooting in his basement, and nobody has a problem with it. And then, since that didn't go on, and my friend's starting to get nervous, and I noticed him looking at the kid, because I'm looking back and forth at the both of them, because at that point, I could only see out of one eye. So I'm looking back and forth, and then, and see what's going on, and we started noticing the kid. The kid ain't saying a word. The kid looks terrified. And once he mentioned and said, let's go to my basement, that kid, it looked like the fear of God in his face. And that's not even really, gives it justice. And my friend got so nervous when he seen that kid's face, he grabbed that rifle with the other hand, and it looked like he was going to take off. And I'm like, I'm hoping he's not going to want to go to this guy's basement. I said, I can't let him go, but I don't want to go to his basement because I already caught him lying. And So then he's starting to get more upset and nervous. And this kid the whole time is sitting there looking like, I mean, he wouldn't say a word. I mean, he was white as a ghost. His eyes were bulging out of his face. And, you know, he was just, you can't really describe it unless you're there, really. But when the kid wouldn't talk and he wasn't con enough to go, by now he said he's, you know, by the third time he told us, he said he had a whole bunch of guns. And we can go down there and shoot all we want. And, you know, first he had no guns. Then he had one. Now he's got a whole bunch. And so then he turns to the kid because the kid won't talk. And I thought he was going to pick the kid up and throw the kid at me. He went to reach down and he got mad. And then all of a sudden he acted like he was joking it off and laughing. And he said, talk to him, tell him it's safe. Tell him nothing's going to happen to him. And I'm like, what the heck is going on here? You know, then the kid, it's like somebody turned the kid on. And at first I thought the kid was a younger kid because they were standing down the hill. We were at the top of the hill because we walked up to the top of the hill where all this concrete work was being done. And like I said, then the kid started talking. I did a double take because the kid he had to be older than me. The kid had to be about 15. And I'm like, man, I'm like, this kid sounded, you know, older than this guy, you know, and he was just getting very upset. I mean, and you know, and so my friend said, look, we got to go. We got somebody waiting for us. We got to go. And I was glad that he said that. And he would not let us leave. And he would not leave until we left that spot because I kept looking because, like I said, there was something big balled up in cloth over in the corner in that pit. But like I said, I've seen the clothes. I can even tell you, you know, I know exactly what the clothes look like. I can still see them and all that blood all over them. And I didn't notice the blood until I went down there to go look at them. And we left and we started walking away. And my friend said, did you see that kid's face? I don't know what's going on there. Once he mentioned that basement, he said, I never seen anything like that even in a scary movie. You know.
All right, we'll continue the discussion of this situation. And you're convinced this was John Wayne Gacy?
Yeah, I'll tell you why when I get back.
All right, we'll be right back. David in Illinois is with us. In class, we're not going to give out David's last name, and you'll see why as this continues. David, what makes you believe that the man that tried to ensnare and entrap you is John Wayne Gacy, the mass murderer?
Okay, now I'll go back just a little bit. The reason we would go over there to that place in pairs is because they already found 2 bodies over there. Okay? 2 boys. I'll talk about that again a little bit later, but now we did find some more things when we went to leave that day. We went to leave. He would not let us mess with whatever was in that pit. He was not going to leave and let us get near it. But the kid was still acting crazy, just weird. He acted terrified. And so we left and we wound up walking right through the woods over where they were, and we came across a cliff to go down. My friend he wasn't scared of nothing. And he was so scared, he said, we got to get away from this guy. We can't risk him coming up behind us. And he said, if we try to climb down, we're going to have to find another way because I'm not losing the rifle. That's all we got. And so we finally found a way down and worked our way down. And then we crossed and went to the river and then went to the lakes on the other side where we go. But we zigzagged and went up and down different places over there. So in case he was following us, we can keep an eye on. And then we went down to another cliff, and that's when we found another car ditched in the water. and there was a there was a lot of, low. We didn't have much participation that time, and you could see where the water line went way down. And it was a little bit too cold. In other words, we were going to swim down to see what was in the car, because where the car was, somebody put it there on purpose because they already took the plates off. And it was a pretty nice car. And if I recall, the car was a brownish color, chrome bumper. And he actually said, look, if we go down there, with what just happened there, with all that blood in this, we'll probably find a body down there. Yeah, we got to go. And then we wound up finding some teeth, and they were fresh teeth. And I wouldn't touch the teeth, okay? And he picked them up. He says, I don't know what around here has teeth this big, but these are fresh. You want to look at them? I said, no, I'm staying away from, So we got back after that. Like I said, they already found 2 bodies there. We got back after that, and we told our friends on the way, we took another big route back. We stopped at the lakes to get something to eat, find something to eat, and we got back. Now, we immediately told my dad when we got home, and my dad was ticked because my dad had another teenage girl home at home. My father worked in law enforcement, and he hung around with people that did that kind of thing. Okay, but I didn't know who that guy was yet. Okay, they didn't know anything about him as far as the news. My father wouldn't let us talk about it. He said we were to shut up and not say a word. And Keith was more surprised that he had a teenage. He said that girl was only in high school. And I told him, I says, that's not the first time the other girl was 14. So, anyways, he wound up leaving and took a plane home. He called me twice to make sure he got to their new home. And this was a year after that. A friend of mine came up and he said, hey, did you hear about the guy over there on the news that they caught that was using kids to lure other kids, and he was killing them? And I said, what? And he pointed in the direction right where we were. And I said, oh, man. And I tried to bring it up to my dad again. And he flipped out again, and he told me if I were to talk about it again, I would show up out of the hospital with a tube in my mouth. So,
well, let's talk more about this when we come back. And let's figure out who this girl was that you're talking about, the 14-year-old, when we come back.
Okay.
David in Illinois. David's with us, and we're talking about John Wayne Gacy. David, did I hear you say that your dad was in law enforcement and he hung around with people like Gacy? Is that what I heard you say?
Yes. Not only did he hang out, they had him hide another girl along with me because he was hiding me there. That's why they would take me to work with them and keep me there with them. They'd move me around. And the reason why it initially started, which when I was in first grade for summer, when you're out of school, they took me to one of their little gatherings.
David, are you saying that your dad was part of this murderous ring, and there was more than just John Wayne Gacy and your dad involved?
They had an issue where they had kids, and they had sex. They had people. Some of his other cop buddies were totally naked. When they first took me there, I was the only one. I did not take my clothes off. I was sitting there next to a concrete pool, and one of his police buddies was sitting there butt naked, and I did not know at that time what an erect male was. But he was, and he was trying to talk me into asking me to take my clothes off. I felt uncomfortable. I got up and went into the house that they were at and sat down, in which case people were having intercourse around me, but I did not know what that was happening. Okay?
Who was this 14-year-old girl that was at your house?
A 14-year-old girl, he brought home, all I know is her name was Kitty. He brought her home. He said they needed her to hide her out. They knew he was hiding me, so they wanted him to hide her with me. And I asked her what her name was, and I asked her how old she was. So the first day he brought her home. He took her shopping to a place called Zaire, and we went into the store. They went to the female section on the left when we get in the store, and they got small little lingerie and came out, and she would walk around with that on when we were home, and I was only in 4th grade when that happened, and being a young kid, you see somebody walking around, my first thoughts were, how can you wear something so small like that? It doesn't even cover you up. That was my thought, okay? I was a kid, So, yeah, and then all of a sudden one day, after she was there for a few months, she was gone. Never seen her.
So, David, are you saying that this 14-year-old girl was used as a sex slave, and that these law enforcement types were part of this, we'll call them a gang, if you will, and that your father was protecting you from his buddies? Is that what we're saying?
My father was hiding me because I went to school when I started back to 2nd grade, and they asked me, what did we do this summer? And by this point, my father would lose control, and his babysitter was handcuffing me by my ankles to the bed. I've already had a busted up arm twice, a finger almost cut off. And so they knew something was going on with me. So when I came to school and started telling them what we did for the summer, now they started to say, wait a minute. And all the other kids were talking about it because they asked me what we did this summer that we did unusual. So I told them. And they started to observe me more. They let me sit in the class in the back by myself to do my work. Then they really paid attention because I did something unique. And I went through the 2nd grade and most of the 3rd grade, and under a few months of school. So they were going to take me. I didn't know about this. He lost custody, but they were going to take me at school because they knew he was a cop and he had a gun. Well, he got tipped off by his buddies, and they came at night. They took me to the precinct where he was, and they kept me there. And so ever since then, they would move me around all over the place. But it's what they did to me when they kept me there and then moved me around is what I would like to know why God made me go through that. That's my part. For me, what my nightmares are about. But all the other people that I know about that had cases and people that lost their lives that I knew about, that they would not let me go to court and talk because they could not let that agency find me. Because if they found me, those guys would lose their jobs and they'd go to jail. And he told me, if they find us and they find you, I don't have to put you down. They will. His buddies will. So when you're guarded by cops all the time, You're in bandages all the time. And when people come up to you and say, why is that kid with you guys? And my dad would tell people, criminals that are trying to get to me are doing this to him, so we have to keep him with us to keep him safe. That was one of the things that they told other people. They kept me out of school for almost a year and a half the first time, moving me around. So, somebody, now I'm going to tell you, I'll go back real quick and tell you why I think that was Gacy. I was cleaning the house again about 10 years back. I was seen on TV, and they talked about this other area that was right by his house where the other river was, and they said 2 bodies were there. They think he had something to do with them, but they didn't know. And I said, wait a minute. My dad called because he checks up on me to make sure I don't talk, or he keeps track of everything I do. And I told him, I said, don't you think we should tell somebody about this? And he said, I told you. You open your mouth. He said, you got a wife. All I got to make is a phone call. She will not make it out. So what do you do? What do you do? That's what I just got to
So
ask.
you're left in a situation where you're being abused. You were left in a situation where you've been abused. The people you know have been abused. You're getting harmed. Bones are being broken, physically harmed. You can't call the police because the police are the problem. Is that correct?
Yes. And every time teachers would start to notice, they would pull me and move me somewhere else. But I'm going to tell you, every time he was ordered to take me to court, this is the shocker. I'm going to tell you where they hid me. They hid me at the research university that he was affiliated as a police officer with the other Chicago cops. And that's where, as long as they hid me there and they used my body for medical research, the courts could not touch me. And while they were there, the first time they hid me there for almost, 6 weeks, maybe 2 months, when they were cutting me up, somebody got tipped off that I was there. And the newspaper were going to have the Harlem Globetrotters show up. And they panicked. And they said, we got to get him out of here tomorrow. They're showing up. We can't risk him showing up in the newspapers. So they had to take me out of there for the day. And I had to be brought back when they were all gone. So they didn't show me because they wanted to take pictures. They said they worried somebody tipped them off, I was there. But they did this every time. And after that, and they got tipped off, and the student doctor started having problems with what they were doing to me. So then his police buddies would guard my room every time they put me in there. So I had police buddies of his with guns guarding my room while they were bandaging me up. You know what handcuffs do to a kid that gets one meal a day and his body is suffering from deep malnutrition? People said I looked like I came from the concentration camp. The research doctors that was doing this to me, they said I should feel good about myself because if they didn't have me, they would have to practice on corpses. I was too young to know what corpse meant, so I tried to get a dictionary. And my dad asked me, what am I doing with a dictionary? I said, I want to see what corpse meant. He said, dictionaries are not allowed in the house again. No more. I wasn't allowed to look at a dictionary again. So that's what, that's what I think. And if people think that what happened to me didn't happen to me, I had an older brother. My older brother witnessed this. He was terrified that if they stopped doing this to me and he got caught, they would start doing it to him. And I will tell you this, the day we went to that place when we were kids, my brother was there. I will not tell you his name. He left the country. He tried to talk me into leaving the country, but I would have had to leave my wife and try to get her there.
David, have you ever discussed this on the radio before?
No. I started to talk about stuff on other radio shows because in order to keep him, after I left home, and I did not know that he was applying for grants and getting grants from me until I was 24 years old. So he kept finding me, okay? And in order to keep them from talking to me, he started giving me classified information. He said, this way, they will never let you get on the stand.
Dave, when we come back, would you tell us what happened to your dad and what kind of experiments? David, I'm certain that those in class today are numb by what they're hearing. Are you saying that there was a gang of child rapists and murderers that included the Chicago police and included your father? Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
What happened to your father?
My father finally died not long ago. I didn't get word. He told me that if you don't have me calling you and talking to you, that means I'm dead and you can talk. Well, I checked everywhere. This man worked. He did classified. Oh, by the way, he did the same thing when he was in the Marines and military police to the kids in Vietnam. That's where he learned it from. I've seen the pictures. When I was a kid, he told me that's what we can do and get away with it. That's why we carry our badges and we keep them. Okay? But this man he did this. He did the police for 20 years. He went and worked at a classified air base in Nevada. That's where he left when I started working for the state because he was afraid. That's when this grant, when he was applying, saying he was still taking care of me when I was traveling around the state trying to get away from him, got shut off. So he was afraid he was going to get in trouble. So he went back to the federal government. And then he went back to law enforcement for the federal government after he left the base because he was afraid that the base was so much classified. He was afraid that it was going to get back to him about the situation with me. And plus, he was telling me the things that were going on every one of those places and sharing photographs with me. Because this way, if I knew and I was ever on court, on a stand, he said, we will never let you talk. And I was in a situation where I was going to should have been on the stand. And that's exactly why they contacted him and told him where I was. But
what kind of medical experiments did they do on you, David, at this
the first time
institution,
they had me there?
Institution.
Yes. The first time they put me in there, they rushed me in and they did an eye surgery on the right eye. They did the right eye because my left arm was banged up and it needed physical therapy. So they wanted to make sure I didn't bump into nothing. That's why they started working on the right eye. The problem is I wasn't healthy enough. He was starving me and one meal a day. And I almost didn't make it through the first surgery. That's the first time. So when I got to see the kid in the next room hauled away and passed away and found out that almost happened to me, part of me was wishing it was me. And maybe someday I'll tell you what me and the roommate tried to do to make this stuff stop. Because every time I was there, my body was at their beck and call 24 hours a day. Now, before they left me there, my dad wanted to immediately take the other eye. And the guy says, we can't get away with that. We can argue one, but we can't do the other one right away. And he said, look, I can't. It's too hot for him out there. What about his arm? He said, well, we could put a list up and teach people how to do a biopsy. So I stopped counting at 30 stitches in my arm when they went and put me through surgery to teach a group of kids, student doctors, how to do a biopsy for no reason at all. No reason.
David, are you able to mention this research hospital?
Yes.
The name of it?
Yes. I know the doctor's name. The books he put.
Do you want to do that now, or
working.
do you want to do that another time?
I'll do it when we come back.
Well, we're done for today.
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't know that. I'm
sorry. We'll do it on. Okay, David, I'll tell you what. If you feel safe, we'll have you back again. This has been absolutely riveting. We're numb. You're in our prayers. You need to wait and hear what they did to me in some of those surgeries. So I'll be glad David,
to come back.
Thank you so much for being with us. Everyone all set? Cocked? Locked? Hour number 2 of USA Prepares. Joel Skousen is with us. Now, Joel was raised in Oregon in the United States of America. He's a Marine. He was a fighter pilot during the Vietnam conflict era. He's the publisher of World Affairs Brief. That's worldaffairsbrief.com. He's the author of the book Strategic Relocation, North American Guide to Safe Places. I have a copy right here. I've had it for years. Welcome, Joel Skousen.
Thank you, Vince. Good to be with you. I'm also the author of the Secure Home, which will cover most of the material we're talking about today in preparedness.
Yes, the Secure Home. Class, if you want to go to the website, it's joelskousen.com. That'll take you to the main page that will let you go to about Joel Skousen, the World Affairs Brief, Strategic Location, Secure Home, and Philosophy of Law and Government. That's at joelskousen.com, JoelSkousen.com. And I've got to tell you, I've had for years a personalized copy of Strategic Relocation. It is truly outstanding, and it verified my work in finding the best place for me to live with my family, which happens to be in the Missouri Ozark Mountains. Joel, do you have any comments about our selection coinciding with your recommendation?
Yeah, the Ozarks, which are, there's Missouri Ozarks, there's Oklahoma Ozarks, and Arkansas Ozarks, and they're all very, very good areas. To find mountainous, treed areas with good water and away from high-density population, which is the major threat we're trying to get away with. So for the south central part of the United States, this is one of my top-rated areas.
Joel, I've said this on the air, and I'd love to have your critique of it. I believe that what we're seeing all around us, the cracks in society, the dishonesty, the surveillance, the resistance that we're seeing in the United States, and it's actually happening all over the world. I believe that we've already started the second civil war. We are already in the beginning stages. Do you think that is an overstatement, or do you think I might be right?
Well, actually, I don't feel like it's ever going to erupt into an actual definitive civil war. The divide between society is getting more hardened all the time and more radical all the time, especially on the part of the radical left. We've been propagandizing U.S. students in public schools for decades now, and so it's finally showing up as this millennial generation, that's just all for socialism. They've never been taught what the price of socialism is, how it doesn't really work, and what the cost is in terms of fundamental liberty and free markets and rights. And so this is causing the great divide. It's never going to be healed. It's, as the Internet comes out, as there more and more information that gets the people on the correct side of understanding law and liberty are hardened, but they're a minority now. We are losing the majority because of even conservatives sending their kids to public schools lose most of their own students and don't become conservative. They become liberals. They start believing in evolution, all that stuff. And so this is the problem. But you see, my major thrust in the World Affairs Brief is to warn people that the powers that be, the deep state, are preparing to put us into a World War III, a war with Russia and China. And, if that wasn't there, and that's going to be, preempted, or not preempted, but preceded by an EMP strike, it takes 6 to 8 high-altitude nuclear weapons to do that kind of strike. So forget about North Korea, Iran, or other types of it. It's going to be Russia and China that do this EMP strike about 15 minutes before a physical nuclear strike on U.S. military forces. That's going to create a social unrest in a situation whereby, with a grid-down situation, and it won't be prepared for it, even though the government is starting to talk about it, it won't be enough time to get this grid hardened, and there's not enough money to do that. It won't get done. So we're going to face a massive chaos situation of people pillaging, and large urban areas are going to become virtually unlivable. There won't be any electricity from 6 months to a year, depending on the area, because very few electrical centers have the power to self-start without some other place to put the electricity. In other words, they got to have a grid to start up most generators. There's a few islanding areas in the United States that can start up, and they'll have electricity, somewhat faster if they can get a hold of the transmitters, the huge mega transformers that are built overseas that we don't stockpile in the U.S. But this is very serious. And what I'm just saying is, civil war tends to be because of the political divide, but when nobody's got food and water and everybody is pillaging and trying to survive, it's not really civil war, it's chaos. And that's what you've got to really prepare for.
Joel Skousen, there are many of us who are students of this broadcast and instructors who have their own solar power generation system. I have one. I'm broadcasting off-grid right now. And I've selected a specific system. We can talk about that in a couple minutes. But what is the likelihood that people like me who have systems that are off-grid will be taken out by one of these EMPs?
Well, the EMP is not, even though the grid will go down, the surge that takes the grid down will vary according to the area. The most important thing is the most powerful surge to hit your system is going to come down the power lines. Now, if you are off-grid, as you are, you won't get that major surge. And by the way, there's a lot of work being done now on whole house surge protection. For those of you, most of your listeners are connected to the grid, to shunt that. But the highest selling EMP shield protector, called EMP Shield, has been tested by Dr. Arthur Bradley, a PhD in electronic engineering, and found it doesn't work at all. It doesn't tap down anything. He's in the process of building a better mousetrap. There's already one military-grade EMP protector by Transtector Corporation, which does effectively clamp down that which comes down the power line. It's about $1,200, but the cheaper ones apparently don't work very well. And so,
right.
People, but in an off-grid situation, there are individual EMP protectors that you need to put within the system. For example, when we design a new home from scratch, we always put the wiring in conduit or shielded cable, including all of your computer lines, all of your power lines in the house. So the house itself won't pick up the EMP. So even if you're off-grid and you have normal wiring in your house, it's going to pick up EMP, and it's depending on where it is in the country, the highest radiation from an EMP is about a 300-mile circle underneath each weapon. It takes about 6 to 8 weapons to take down the whole grid, not just one. And so if you're under one of those 300-mile circles, you could get maximum EMP, and it will destabilize computer chips, though the government says that a lot of those cars will restart if you turn the key off and start it back up again. But not so with, a lot of household equipment. If you have any radio equipment, you want to make sure you don't keep it connected to antenna that will pick up EMP. Your solar wiring coming down from your panels needs to have an EMP protector on it. to protect your inverters from being fried or your charge controllers. In non-snow country, in the South, for example, you could probably get away with this. We developed a technique where you take this 1-inch stainless steel fine wire mesh that you can get on the internet, and you drape it over your panels in kind of an arch. It doesn't tear the solar by about 1 to 2%, but it does, if it's grounded, it does take the EMP shield away from solar panels. If you have AC coupled solar panels that have an inverter on them, they're particularly at risk. It's not the panels themselves that get affected by EMP as it is the diodes get blown, that are rectifying the DC to AC in some of the newer systems. So, yeah, there are some things to worry about in terms of protection from EMP.
So to recap what you've just said, Joel Skousen, I believe the message is that the house wiring for most homes today in the walls is not in conduit. We're talking about metal conduit, actually thin metal pipe called EMT, which would protect the wire from absorbing an EMP. We're talking about that is the antenna. That's connected to our equipment. And ultimately, if we have a grid-tied system or a hybrid system, a hybrid solar generation system that is on-grid and off-grid, depending on how much power is being generated by the solar panels, that system is at risk of being taken out by an EMP because of all the antennas that are interconnected within a home, which means all the wiring, the telephone wiring, the cables for the computers, everything, all the power cords from the toaster and the microwave oven, everything all plugged in, all those wires are acting as antennas to absorb that EMP to blow the on-grid system, correct?
That's correct. Now, electric motors are generally much more resistant to EMP. They can take much better surges. Refrigerators may, except the high-tech computerized refrigerators will get the computers fried, but the motors, will probably still survive on that. But that's why I say there are individual protectors. DTEK is another company that builds very good, high-quality surge protectors. They have to operate in less than 2 nanoseconds to stop the fast-acting EMP surge. You can plug your equipment and your computer into one of those, into the wall. So if the wall acts as an antenna, it gets stopped by the protector. The only thing then at risk is the pigtail electrical cord from your computer. And you can help that situation by keeping that tightly coiled rather than long and strung out.
Joel Skousen's with us, joelskousen.com. We're going into a break. Joel will be back in just a couple of minutes. Let's discuss concealment. Okay, so if we do have a system, how do we make sure that it's not so visible? Can we do that? And then let's talk about generators and generator noise. How do we abate that? Class, Joel Skousen's with us, and if you need a quick way to get to his website, just go to usaprepares.com, click on the Instructors tab, and you'll see under Authors, Joel Skousen. You click there, and it'll take you right to his website. Joel, you mentioned the word chaos. So in a grid-down situation, the power's down, the electricity's down, we have no idea when it's coming back, radio and TV are down, internet's down, there's no communications, and we're wondering, what do we do? Do those who have already prepared, expecting this to happen, who have solar panels, are they at risk by having solar panels that can be visible, either on the roof or in an array that they've built?
Well, it's hard to conceal solar panels. They're big. So the important point is to make sure that not so much that you make them invisible. You can't really do that unless you have a big flat roof building that you can put them up on top where nobody can see it from down below. But short of that, and most residential buildings don't qualify for that, those solar panels are going to be visible. I do like to see them on the roof so they're out of the way so they can't be directly sabotaged. Even if people throw rocks at them, for example, out of spite that you've got electricity and they don't, really won't damage a solar panel. Even if it cracks the glass, you can still, operate. If you're using an EMP protective screen of the 1-inch, very fine stainless steel grid over the panels, that would protect them against damage as well. But as I say, you can't really conceal them and get them in full sunlight either. So does that answer your question?
Yeah, it does. And, I've got solar panels, and I don't know how to conceal them other than maybe putting a, military type tarp over them. But of course, if I do that, they won't work. So
That's right.
it's a problem. Okay, so let's go to generators. Now, a lot of people have bought generators for the storms that we've had, and I don't think they've thought through how much fuel that a gasoline-powered generator takes. But let's talk about, let's say they do have fuel, and whether it be diesel, gasoline, or propane. What about the sound that comes out of the mechanical movement of the pistons, the crank shaft, the connecting rods, all of that mechanical noise, and the exhaust? What do we do about that?
Well, there's several things you can do. A lot of generators from Generac and others, the typical house generators you see that are propane or natural gas fired, come in a enclosure, which does reduce the sound about a third. But if you really want, nearly full soundproofing of a generator system, you have to put it inside a small block building by the side of the house and insulate that for sound, and then use a special silencing muffler. The best ones on the market for the muffler is Hapco mufflers out of Portland, Oregon, and that's at the website Harco MFC Manufacturing, or let's say MFG. So HarcoMFG.com, you can get to Harco or Hapco silencing mufflers, and these are really essentially, you build a chimney coming out of this thing and put those mufflers inside the building, et cetera, and it just sounds like a furnace going on. So that really silences it. But you put it inside a block building, and then you have to insulate that on the inside. And the only weakness here in an insulated building, and the key to sound insulation is use various different materials. Concrete block, for example, is a very good sound insulator at a certain frequency. In the lower frequencies, but not the higher frequencies. And you cut the higher frequencies by putting a little 2x4 wall insulated on the inside with a couple of layers of sheetrock. You can also get the finger foam, which really is sound deadening, but that's, kind of overkill for most people. But it's important to use like a 1/2 inch and a 5/8 inch sheetrock together, because one will transmit certain sounds, and then the thicker one will block those and let through other ones. But the combination of 2 layers of sheetrock, some fiberglass insulation, and then concrete block outside wall will silence most any generators. Now, what about the intake air? You're going to have a free flow of intake air in there, and that's a difficult thing to soundproof. I prefer to take the intake air from above on the roof rather than the side wall, because it's hard to keep that sound from coming out the vents that give intake air to a generator.
Very, very good points. We'll talk a little bit more about that when we come back. Joel Skousen's with us, joelskousen.com. Also link on usaprepares.com on the instructors tab. We're talking about staying below the radar. Joel, as you know, I live on a farm here in the Ozark Mountains in Missouri, and we need to protect our water system for our cattle, because if we have a drought and the creek is dry and the ponds are empty, we've got to have well water for our cows, and they drink about 30 gallons apiece, each cow. So a significant amount of water is necessary for us to keep our farm in operation. So what I did was I bought a 2-cylinder diesel generator. Now, this is Vietnam era. It's a military 1,800 RPM diesel generator. It's called an MEP-002A. It's a 5 kVA, about 6,250 watts, 10 horsepower, and it runs at 1,800 RPM. It's air-cooled, and it is so loud that there is a warning that came with it for the military users that you must wear hearing protection, or you will damage your hearing. That's how loud this is. It's like a jackhammer. I mean, it's that loud. So I have a sound kit on this thing that reduces it to where it's not quite so loud. Then it's in a building, as you mentioned. It uses about a half a gallon per hour. It's air-cooled, which makes it louder than a water-cooled engine, because water-cooled engines, you think of it like that Volkswagen Bug going down the road compared to a four-cylinder U.S. car or Asian car that has a water-cooled engine. So you need to keep that in mind, as you said. So what I did was I bought a muffler that was designed for a four-cylinder car, and I fabricated with automotive exhaust pipe, bent it as I needed to fabricate an exhaust, and it works great. So what you're saying is perfect, but you have to have several layers of sound deadening material in order to have it quiet enough so that you can't hear it, because you could probably hear this engine from a mile away if I didn't do all those things. Any comments?
Well, there are quieter generators. More modern generators are not as noisy as that one, and there's a lot of noise from the generator itself because it's a compression ignition, and so there's a lot of bang in there going on, a lot of rattling of the engine, etc. There's a lot of older Chinese built generators from the World War II area that are very slow turning, and even one-cylinder ones that are very surprisingly quiet. Big, huge cylinder, boom, 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 boom. But it's not the rattle, rattle, rattle that a lot of the modern diesels. But I do like diesel generators. You get the most fuel bang for the buck. You can store it. You can haul it in an emergency. Propane and natural gas are more convenient, but I'll tell you, trying to get a propane tank refilled by hand is impossible. You've got to have a truck with a power pump to do it, and that's just not going to be capable. Propane has a lot less heat value per gallon as well, so trying to run a generator off a propane tank is not going to last you very long. So diesel is really the way to go. If you're in colder climates, you've got to prepare to keep the engines warm so that you can start them, which is a problem in sub-freezing weather.
Mm-hmm. Joel Skousen, there are, switching back to solar power generation systems, there are several types of systems. There's the off-grid, which means self-contained. You don't depend on the grid at all. Then there's the grid-tied, which is you have some solar panels and then you pump your electricity to the grid and you take it from the grid. So, but you don't have any electricity at all if the grid goes down. Period. You're done. There's no AC current if the grid goes down. And then there's the hybrid system, which is what we have. We can sell our electricity if we have excess. We can buy it if we don't have enough, like in the summers for air conditioning, or we can, through software, just say, you know what, disconnect. We're off the grid. When you have one of these systems that's either hybrid or off-grid, you have a choice of battery types, different kinds of cells. What kind do you like and why?
Well, hands down now, the best battery systems, even though they're the most expensive, are the lithium ion phosphate, not the Tesla Powerwall, which is a cobalt lithium ion that cars use. The lithium ion phosphate is the best for storage now, and it's about 10 times more expensive than your lead-acid batteries, but they last and last and last. In fact, people have done actual cost per use of the battery over 10 years. The expensive lithium-ion phosphate batteries are by far your cheapest battery option, the cheapest over the long term, because they can cycle clear down to 20%. For example, lead acid, you don't dare go much below 80%, or you start damaging the batteries. And you can cycle those lithium-ion phosphate batteries. They're guaranteed for 10,000 cycles down to 20% and back up. And they won't be damaged even if you go near zero, unlike lead acid, which, really gets damaged. So lithium ion phosphate really is the best way. They don't deteriorate over time. Lead acid does by sitting and even keeping them charged. They'll start to deteriorate and get phosphating problems. There's nickel iron batteries as well, which are more expensive and I think better than lead acid, but when you look at the cost versus lifetime trade-off, it still doesn't compare to lithium iron phosphate batteries.
Okay, and when I selected ours, and we selected the nickel iron batteries, or cells, I should say, that we made a battery from, the lithium iron phosphate really wasn't an alternative that made economic sense back then. How recently did these become economically viable, the lithium iron phosphate?
Within the last 2 years is all. So
yeah.
This is a recent phenomenon, but they are basically, but we've done and designed a lot of systems and lead acid flooded batteries, and I tell you, it's really a really hassle dealing with filling them with water and equalizing charges. Nickel iron is less problematic in that regard, but still, the cost is high. They're heavy. I just think the more compact, safer lithium iron phosphate batteries is the way to go. It takes less of them because you can get more power in a smaller package. In fact, there's some really new small portable solar systems like the iNergy system, which has lithium ion phosphate batteries in an inverter battery pack. It only weighs about 30 or 40 pounds, and they really do a good job for small backup systems to keep your computers running, during a power outage. I really like that. But the big thing in solar that people need to understand is, and you've probably got a traditional solar system where you have DC solar energy created from the panels into a charge controller that then charges the batteries, and then you come out of the batteries for everything you use through an inverter system. Is that correct?
That's exactly correct. A couple charge controllers, a couple solar arrays, and 500 ampere hours at 48 volts for the nickel iron battery bank.
Now, everything you do in your solar system comes through the battery bank. The newest technology, the latest, and it's really come into 2 years ago into Germany with SMA, called self-consumption technology. Essentially, Germany cut all their solar subsidies, and so there's no incentive to sell back to the power grid anymore. And so SMA developed where the solar panel would take precedent, go into your house directly through AC conversion, called AC coupling. And you would only take from the grid as you need it. In other words, you would use you don't sell back to the grid and take it back. You use all of your solar after your batteries are charged. And you don't even draw from your batteries. The solar panels themselves are powering your electrical circuits through an AC inverter. Now, that's just recently this year come into the United States, and it's called blending here. And the Radiant Outback has blending. The Schneider XW system inverters has blending. And that basically means you can prioritize so that your solar, after the batteries are charged, goes directly into your household panels, and you're only taking from the grid. So in many jurisdictions, you sell back at a discount, and what you take from the grid is at full retail price. So you really don't get the value of your solar. This is all changing now with blending technology. Here's the list of what people need to keep in mind in looking for a modern solar system. One, you want blending technology, and there's a few others. But you also want to be able to stack inverters. Not all inverters stack. Like there's a hybrid Magnum inverter that does blending, but you can't stack it, so you're limited to 120. The other Magnums do, but they don't. They can be stacked and get 240 volts, for example, but they don't do blending. You want an inverter that has two AC inputs, that you can have a generator attached. And some inverters don't allow a generator attached. Some inverters do blending, like the Pica systems, but they don't do off-grid. You have to be tied to the grid for those. So it's becoming a little more complex, but clearly there are real benefits from having this blending technology and being able to tie to a generator. What I like to see, to avoid using a lot of fuel for a generator, is to have a medium-sized solar system that handles the house during most of the day, and you only have to turn on the generator during high load situations, or if your battery in cloudy days, your batteries aren't get charged enough by solar, you turn the generator on to do that. But you're not running a generator all day long to keep a refrigerator going or to keep your computers going, because that burns a lot of fuel. So a hybrid generator solar system is really the most efficient way to do it, where you don't have you have to have a huge solar system capable of running heat pumps, and refrigeration is generally hard on batteries, but it's important to, I think, think in terms of tying a generator to a solar system. If you're off-grid, you need to have a power diversion. Very few solar systems have power diversion built in, whereby you can start to heat water or air with your excess solar energy when you're not using it in the house. You also need to have an inverter that's capable of a good 2 or 3 stage charging of batteries, so that you can charge from the solars or charge from the grid. And here's another important tip. Are we running out of time here, Vincent?
We've got about 10 seconds before the next break. Well, I'll tell you what, let's come back to that right after these few short commercial announcements. And then let's talk about how not to be bothered by others when everything goes south. We'll be right back with Joel Skousen. Class, quick reminder, if you'd like to learn more about what we're talking about, you can go to Joel Skousen's website, joelskousen.com, Joel, SKOUSEN.com. That is the page that will take you wherever you need to go within his websites and web pages. Joel, you're talking about a charge controller and an inverter, the charge controller having both 2 and 3 stage charging. Please continue.
No, charge controllers are controlling the charge from solar panels. I'm talking about an internal battery charger in the inverter. It needs to be at 2 or 3 stages so that it can handle AGM, glass mat batteries, nickel, iron, or lead acid, or even lithium iron phosphate. So you need a fairly sophisticated charger. But here's the key thing with this new blending technology, whereby you're taking power from the solar panels and directly into your panel and only taking from the grid. You can see the advantage of that. You're not wearing your batteries down. If you've got enough sun shining, it's powering everything directly through your panel. You're not using the grid, even though you're still connected to the grid. But in a grid-down situation, that AC-coupled solar panels, which are pumping AC electricity down to your system, not DC, so there's no charge, they don't work when the grid is down unless you have something to sync to, meaning to synchronize. The mini inverters on the solar panels have to be synchronized to like a grid power in order for them to turn on. And so the way to do that, easier to have a generator tied into your system, a good generator with a good stable AC, so that the AC coupled solar panels can sync to. Or, here's the secret, you can have 1 or 2 solar panels with DC coupling, meaning you have a traditional charge controller charging the battery. That then can power your inverter, which a separate inverter, which can then sync your other panels or sync your other AC system, so that you can grid tie into your panel. I'm not grid tie, but get your solar blending occurring. Am I making myself clear? Is that?
Yes. Yeah, you have to have a reference point for 60 cycles. You're absolutely
right. So remember, the blending technology is AC-coupled solar system, not DC. Mm-hmm. But in order for that to operate in a grid-down situation, you need a source of AC. So either a generator or a couple of panels that are in DC powering your inverter, which can backfeed an AC signal to the rest of the system.
Joel Skousen, how do we avoid being bothered by others? Let's say everything goes south. Worst case scenario, we're in chaos. How do we avoid being pestered by other people?
Well, that's where strategic relocation comes into being. You cannot expect not to be bothered people if you're in the middle of a subdivision. Subdivisions are going to absorb pillaging and refugees like a sponge. In other words, they're going to go from house to house, subdivision to subdivision, and before they ever think about going out in the hinterland. And even when I recommend strategic relocation in the hinterland, you want to be kind of off the beaten path. You don't want to be on a major secondary road, fully visible from the road. You kind of want to be off into the trees or around a hill or something so that your house isn't the house that's readily available. So avoiding population density and having suburbs between you and your rural residents to absorb refugees helps to cut down the flow. Now, there will be what I call point threats, that is, guys in pickup trucks that still have fuel that are going to range far and wide to pillage. But those you can handle with self-defense mechanisms, and I always recommend that people have a secure room built into underground, usually in a basement space, so they can get out of the way if you have overwhelming force coming down the road. Leave your doors open. You've got all your storage supplies in a concealed safe room or a shelter. I never encourage clients to use the B word, the bunker word, because that triggers all kinds of NSA, spying things. But call it a shelter, a safe room, or a tornado shelter, whatever it is. But keep all your expensive supplies in a safe, concealed space so that if you do get overwhelmed, you can get out of the way. They can't get to you.
Class, this was not a 101 level class. This was much higher level. We went very quickly. We assume that you have made some investigations into the topics that we were talking about. Joel Skousen, do you think you'll be able to come back?
I'd be happy to, Vince. And in the meantime, people can go to my website and order the Secure Home, where they get all of this new information. It's the new 4th edition. It's available at joelskousen.com.
Joel, thank you so much for being with us. We'll stay in touch.
Thank you, Vince. Bye.
Class, above all, honesty and integrity. What happens next is up to you.